All right, I'm calling this transportation meeting to order at 5:45. Roll call. We have Michael Loth and Amanda Reineman. Item 3, agenda revisions and approval.
Move to approve the agenda.
Mike.
Second, Amanda.
Amanda, a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Item number 4, approve the minutes from November 2nd, 2020 meeting.
I move to approve the meeting minutes from November 2nd, 2020.
Amanda,
Second.
second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, and we'll move on to number 5, new business discussion with appropriate action. Under A, review and discussion of the 2021-2022 transportation routes and ridership options presented by Go Right Way. And I see we have Colleen and Patty here.
I don't think mine. Am I working? Okay. So this is an item that we're bringing back. We did meet in November and we made some, I guess, short-term decisions regarding some of the routes, and then we created a timeline to bring some long-term decisions which would have more I guess it would take longer to implement and would have to be communicated to families, and it would be for next year and then into the future. So we created a timeline which the committee saw. So Go Right Way put together some ideas that they would bring then to the committee in February. We'd have a discussion, and then they would bring back additional or some changes in March to then hopefully make a decision to go to full board, whatever direction we move by April, and then we could be able to communicate it by next school year. So I have Patty and Colleen from Right Way. They're going to go over the 2 documents that you received. The first one is regarding the public school, and then the other one is the private school transportation.
Everyone can hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay. So the first document that you have in front of you, the future options for the coming school year, involve the combining of the transportation tiers to route the high schoolers and the middle schoolers together. Okay? We really wanted to try and focus on the public school, home to school transportation. So Patty and her team worked really hard at blending them together. Now, please know you do have a 20% virtual student population yet at this time, but the ridership, when we get to the ridership statistics a little bit further on this evening, we're pretty confident that 20%, if they would switch back to in-person learning, it shouldn't have too terribly much of an effect on the combined high school and middle school routes, okay? So the G and the K, that's Germantown High School, Kennedy Middle School. So we're proposing first tier transportation, and again, this would be identical in the morning and the afternoon, that the high schoolers and middle schoolers would be routed together. We're confident that we can do that with 23 routes. The second tier, Rockfield and Amy Bell, would be the second tier, the elementary to and from school transportation. And we are not proposing any time changes for Rockfield or Amy Bell. All right. There would need to be some time flexing at the middle school and or the high school. Those times could be whatever you want them to be, but the key is that the high school and middle school routes, the ride times would be maximized up to the 60 minutes, which is in your transportation guidelines. Okay. And elementary route ride times would be 45 to 60 minutes. Okay. For Rockfield and Amy Bell, it would be closer to that 60-minute time frame. When we get to below that first the first tier route of 15, where we get through 16 through 22, this is where it gets a little more creative, because two of your public elementary schools are basically right in the village proper area of your school district. So we, just for planning purposes, the county line attendance areas are more in the village of Germantown, so those routes can actually be completed immediately after dropping off at Kennedy Middle School, which would have an earlier drop time. Okay, the drivers could go out, pick up the County Line Elementary School students, drop them at County Line, and then go out and pick up the MacArthur Elementary students and get them to school. In essence, so there would still be some triple routes, but there would be slightly different bell times for the County Line and MacArthur Elementary attendance areas for those public school students. So you'll see in row 22 for the high school and the middle school, we have new C, meaning perhaps add an additional county line route so that we can keep those county line routes as compressed and as short as possible so that there isn't as significant of a bell time change needed for MacArthur Elementary School. So I'll let you kind of process and absorb that.
All right, Colleen, I'm just going to stop you for a second, though, but I'm speaking for myself, but I think the rest of this, the board members up here are going to go, you're talking about a 20-minute different start time for one elementary school, correct?
Yes.
I don't see that happening.
Okay. And I respect that feedback, Mr. Borden. It's an option. It's a way to fully utilize, the drivers and the equipment
Right.
resources, because there's still, you would need, 6 to 7 additional buses for the public school transportation because there is no way to combine any more of the elementary routes. And just that bell time modification would be a way to limit or lower the number of pieces of equipment needed to service the public school transportation. But I fully respect your feedback. It was an option. It's an out-of-the-box option.
Well, and I agree, but I mean, I'm looking at this and going 8:35 and then 8:55 for another school. I mean, there's a lot of parents that are not going to go for that. And I don't know how the rest of my board members up here feel or anybody on this transportation committee feels about that. Mike?
I don't think it's so bad. I don't think we should just rule it out this evening. Maybe find out what Brett thinks about it, and maybe I don't know who the new principal is going to be, but just in general, I think we should look into it. Are you saying that parents aren't going to go for it because they need the students picked up so they can get to work?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of variables that come into play with it, and it's just that later start, why one school and not all of them? I mean, I know we have to have some flex time between the high school and the middle school, and how much flex time are you talking about?
Between the high school and the middle school?
Right.
If we would drop off at the high school very close to the time that we are currently, I know every once in a while Mr. Farron will call and say, hey, somebody's dropping off slightly before 7 o'clock, but if we dropped off there at 7, we could feasibly have the middle school students over to the middle school site by like 7:10, 7:15.
Okay.
Colleen, I know I briefly asked you at our meeting that we had, if you have high school and middle school tier 1 and there's 23 routes, right? Is there anything you can do for elementary where, 2 schools would be in tier 1 and 2 schools would be in tier 3? I mean, I know that 2 schools would start later. I know that the Rockfield and the Amy Bell are more rural and County Line and MacArthur are more in town. I don't know how that works, but I think it might be a little better if we kind of had, 2 schools at one time and 2 schools at another. And I know it's not, because then you would only need 15 buses about 15 buses, you know, after the high school, middle school, those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like 8 of them could be done after the first tier. Am I counting that? 7 of them?
So it's a matter of, so what I'm hearing, Brittany, is that you're thinking, so high school, middle school, 1 through 15, just hypothetically, then County Line and MacArthur, second tier, Rockfield, Amy Bell, third tier? Something to that effect?
Yeah, and I don't know I don't know because Rockfield and Amy Bell are longer distance, if they should be first and the
There
other
is
two
a
should be second.
lot of territory within the school district boundaries that are covered for Rockfield attendance area. It goes way up to Sherman Road, towards the Jackson area, and Amy Bell is quite a distance out to the west. So that is just truly, even though there are some attendance areas for Amy Bell and Rockfield in the village of Germantown, like, you know, towards the Lake Park area, Lono, you know, those types of things, they do have a lot of very rural areas and distances to cover that would take quite a bit of in-depth study for that.
Right, so like I said, I don't know which is the better, if you'd have MacArthur and County Line together en route, or Rockfield and Amy Bell, or MacArthur and Rockfield, or Amy Bell and County, like, I don't know those, but is it a possibility to have 2 elementary start at 8:15, whatever the time is, and then 2 start at 8:40? I mean, right now we start at 8:45, 8:50 at the elementaries?
8:50.
8:50, so, I mean, there'd only be a 5-minute time change, but it wouldn't be just one school sitting out there being the one time change. That, I mean, just if we're bringing back other options.
Patty, you're taking that note down for me, please? Thank you.
Then you'd have 15 buses running three tiers, and then 8, whatever the bottom, 16
But
to
you could,
23 running.
but you could not transport all of your middle school student population and blend in the high school population in 15 buses.
No. Your first tier would be 1 through 23. Tier 2 would be 1 through 15, and tier 3 would be 1 through 15, if I'm just breaking them up evenly.
So Brittany or Colleen, what's the savings when you reduce a tier?
The true savings comes when you reduce a piece of equipment, both in the morning and the afternoon, whether that comes through greater utilization on the remaining pieces of equipment. A tier itself is just under $12 a tier, times 176 days.
But if you would eliminate a piece of equipment?
If you would eliminate a piece of equipment, for example, where you see up there just a double, you'd have to eliminate a double AM and PM using this year's transportation rates. That would be $231.53 a day. And a triple is the $262.11 a day. So you'd have to eliminate that both in the morning and in the afternoon. That's where the true savings come. Savings is savings. I am not minimizing saving. You know, a lot of savings can be accumulated over time, nickels and dimes and, you know, and things like that. But the true savings is eliminating the entire piece of equipment. Not only is that more beneficial for the school district, but for Right Way as a whole, if we don't need to keep that asset insurance-wise and all of that, you know, we would utilize that elsewhere and not have it be available.
And this, I know, you know, Brittany asked you just to look at this stuff, but what in this, what's up on the screen compared to what we currently are at? What's the savings between now, or this moment and this sheet that we're looking at?
So what you're currently at, and that's where I struggled with that, because there are a lot, it's not all just public school pairings, it's commingled with the private and parochial schools. So there is another slide that we could discuss as far as what path you'd like to go down to related to the private and parochial school transportation. So while we're trying to pull those two entities apart, the public transportation and the private transportation, they do feed and play off of each other. So in looking in the summary that we had from the previous school year, I believe the public school transportation was $1.2 or $3 million, that piece. There's the special needs portion, and then there's the private school portion. So there is some savings. The difference between that 1.2 and 1.3 and the 970, would be a savings.
So can you go over the column on the right-hand side then? So those are your routes, 15 routes times the 231 equals 3,400. So you're saying if our budget was approximately 1.3 million today, this is about 970, so saving approximately.
It could be approximately
230.
that. Correct, Brittany.
Okay.
Correct. And these, of course, are using the current contracted rates for doubles, triple, and single.
So how does this, if the board is like, yep, this is a great idea, how does this affect the private school routes? This idea right here, yes or no?
How does it affect the private school routes?
Correct, because you said they're intertwined with each other.
Every year, Patty does a breakdown of the transportation costs, and she breaks it out into public, special needs is what special needs is, and the private school transportation, where she allocates that out. Okay, so the routing scenario that you saw previously here was if it was just public school, on this first slide here, just public school, there's no private school pairings with any of those routes. That is public high school, middle school, public elementary, okay? So then if you would scroll to the next slide.
Yep, that was it.
Yep, that is it.
Yep.
I was waiting for my eyes to catch up to the, okay, so in the upper left corner where I'm looking at, so you can see where I've written their discussion notes parent contract for those 5 private schools. So for Aquinas, which is located in Menominee Falls, but they are within 5 miles of your district border, there are 2 eligible riders. Currently, none of the Aquinas students are utilizing the transportation service that the school district is offering. Same with Calvary, 6 eligible riders, but there are 2 that are utilizing the transportation, and Chesterton Academy was a new private school this year. They're kind of the high school counterpart to the Aquinas school. It's a Christian school. They have 2 eligible riders, but no one is utilizing that. I would like to point out that Rightway is currently not running the Aquinas Chesterton route for you, and it is not on your transportation invoice, on your monthly transportation invoice, because there are no students, and it would run as a single. Anyhow, so those 3 private schools have very low eligible riders. Now, the key is, I don't know how the Department of Public Instruction calculates out the per pupil transportation cost, but if Aquinas and Chesterton Academy were running, they would be a single in the afternoon. So times the 176 days, because that's what's on your public school calendar. The private schools have, different number of days. And in the afternoon, Calvary does run by itself as a tier, and it's currently paired with a public school route, okay? And in the morning, Calvary is a tier in the morning, so that's the cost of just under $12 for that tier, and it's paired with a public school route. So to figure out what that true cost of transportation is, and is it more cost beneficial to perhaps execute parent contracts with those 3 private schools, that's something that I do not have the knowledge on how to contact what's more beneficial for the school district or not. David Starr and Trinity also have very few riders, very low utilization of their offered transportation that the school district offers to those families. But there are quite a few eligible riders, so I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Brittany, with parent contract situation, a parent contract would need to be offered to all of the eligible riders within the district boundaries, or just those that are currently utilizing?
They have to be offered to any parent that reaches out and requests one.
That requests.
Correct. So if we
Okay.
had 24 students at David Starr, we'll just say that are eligible, and we decide to not transport David Starr, we decide to pay parent contracts if it's cost effective for the district, we would contact the 10 actual riders and we'd say, hey, we will pay you if you transport your student to school. If they all agree, they do agree. But if those 10 tell the other 14 and those 14 call us, we'd have to pay them too. So we'd have to figure out, so the top section of this would be more conversations with the parents and the families and the schools, and we'd have to do the calculation to see if it's even cost beneficial to us or not. I don't know how these intertwine or don't, if they're completely separate than the public school. Like, I don't know if a public school does our schools and then leaves here and goes to a private school, or if we made our changes, if now these would become first tier buses, like.
Yeah. So if the first slide that we looked at, let's just say that, you know, everyone agrees that that is the path that we want to go down, then that 23rd route of Germantown High School students and Kennedy Middle School students could have that St. Gabriel's Crown of Life route run paired with it, so there would be one public-private school pairing, but that would run as a double, so St. Gabriel's Crown of Life would still continue to be a tier in the AM or PM. Okay, so, and St. Boniface, if you can scroll down a little bit more, please, thank you. So, St. Boniface could be serviced with 3 routes, all right? And Grace Lutheran and Bethlehem Lutheran School, who currently have students that ride together already, they could also be serviced with 3 routes, and those would be 3 doubles in the morning and 3 doubles in the afternoon. So both of those schools could be serviced with 3 pieces of equipment, and those would be doubles. And if the ridership remains the same on the Grace Lutheran and Bethlehem Lutheran routes, Patty's pretty confident that the St. Mary students that live within their current established attendance boundary by the Archdiocese, not outside of the St. Mary's, which we just switched back to in December, that she's pretty confident that those St. Mary's students could be absorbed onto those Grace Lutheran and Bethlehem Lutheran routes, but we would need to add an additional shuttle to get those children to St. Mary's School in the falls. And Kettle Moraine Lutheran High School, currently they ride in with the high schoolers, home with the middle schoolers, with 23 students utilizing. You know, there's an option to have 1 route for them in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, rather than keeping them routed currently with the high school students like they are, because when virtual learning goes away and that 20% that you currently have in virtual learning mode flip back to in-person transportation and perhaps would want to utilize the public transportation that the district offers, it would help with capacity to not have those Kettle Moraine Lutheran students on with the public school routes. But if virtual learning continues to be an option that your student population explore and would like to continue, then it would be possible to, keep the Kettle Moraine Lutheran High School students routed with the public school.
So I want to say thanks for putting this together, but I just want to come back to something you said about thinking outside the box. We talked about this back in November, and I'm thinking about thinking outside the box. I wish there'd be more than just one option that would be presented. I think that we need to get down deep and figure out some other things. Myself personally, I'm not real happy with just the one option that's presented. I think there should have been at least two or three options.
Okay.
But I'm just one person, so.
I would too, though, like to see another option. I feel like there's so many things in this, there's so many moving parts in this one piece that,
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally just too much to wrap my head around, that it would be nice to see a little more consistency in this versus that.
Okay.
Mike?
Yes, reading all the material, I didn't quite pick up on everything that you just talked about, so thank you for presenting this evening. I am curious, though, on the later start time for MacArthur, how many pieces of equipment would that eliminate? What kind of a cost savings is that?
Right now, we would be able to utilize the 23 pieces of equipment, and right now there's 28.
So I think,
Yes, there would be 28.
I think that's a good, I don't know about the 20 minutes. It's kind of a Brett question and staff maybe starting at 9:50, but I sure like the sounds of 23 pieces of equipment versus 28. And I think there could be some issues with the parents, if the bus picks up the students a little bit later. For me, I was lucky. If my son was ready to go at 8, I could go to work, and he was reliable enough that he would be out for the bus when it came at 8:22 or whatever it was to pick him up. I'm not sure if that's the case for all parents, but I wouldn't have had an issue if the bus came 20 minutes later, when I still had students, in the grade school. So I think it's something we should keep on the table. I know you initially, Ray, you didn't, care for it, but I initially didn't hear the number of pieces of equipment to be eliminated either. It sounds, from that angle, it sounds pretty good.
Right, and I agree with you, Mike. The only thing that I'm looking at is, I just don't want one elementary different than the other three. So like Brittany brought up, if there was a way that was feasible and we could cut the amount of pieces of equipment and run 2 elementaries at the same time and 2 elementaries at the same time, that would be more palatable for me personally, instead of just one. And I think, and ideally, and I know the boundaries are way out there for the Amy Bell and Rockfield, but ideally, for that to work, it would have to be the Rockfield and Amy Bell would probably be the starting at the one time, or you do the county line and the MacArthur at the one time. But that's why again, the amount of work that went into this, and everything else that's going on is unbelievable. But that's why I would like to look at having this here and then being able to look at this and looking at
Right.
A, B, and C and going and trying to see what we could put
Yep.
together.
And to further expand, Mr. Borden, on your recent comment about, like having 2 elementary buildings on the same time and the other 2 on the same time, maybe it would make more sense to do, the east and the west, like Rockfield and MacArthur, and then County Line and Amy Bell.
Or even that, that's fine.
And split the district vertically rather than,
And it'll cut back on the traveling.
Yep, and that way then, they wouldn't all have the same bell times. 2 would have one set of bell times and 2 would have the other. And the other thing that I had mentioned to Brittany too, I would have no idea how much work goes into making sure that the children have enough educational minutes and what type of special teachers may be shared between the different learning sites. So, I really do see this as a joint effort to help,
Right.
come together and have some good choices for,
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts that we don't know about, like you said, the traveling teachers from building to building and all
Right.
that. So that would be something HR and Brett would need to look at and Brittany would have to look at.
right.
And
So moving the elementary piece off to the table, thoughts and feedback on adjusting the middle school bell times so that they are able to ride with the high school? I mean, those bell times can move at any direction, earlier, later, just keeping in mind that does affect whatever ultimately happens for the public elementary students. I didn't really hear anything about the high schoolers and the middle schoolers, any feedback regarding that?
So we would have them ride together,
They would ride together, yes.
and the pickup times would range from, what, 6:20?
There would probably be some that start just after 6 o'clock, way to the north, way to the west.
What's your earliest pickup now compared to the 6 o'clock that you just stated? Like, are
we have-
people changing their pickup time by 40 minutes, or is it like 15?
Patty? About 15 minutes, Patty said, 10 to 15 minutes.
So I don't think their pickups and drop-offs for the high school, I mean, I don't think they're changing, their
They're not
pickups
changing
are
significantly.
changing much.
The middle schoolers their day would start earlier. The middle school day, the learning day would start earlier. Those children would need to catch the bus earlier. But right now, we have drivers that check in at like 5:45, 5:50, so that they can get to the starting point of their first route by 6 or slightly after. So they can get to the high school by 7 or slightly after. And that's the only reason that we stuck with that time frame. So,
I don't know how I feel about that. To be honest, I'm just thinking of the age difference between, I mean, I know not all seniors ride, but 11 to 12-year-old and a 18-year-old on a bus, and there's a lot there to think about, and I think that, I don't know, between the schools, parents.
Yeah, I think the start times probably aren't so bad. I am a little bit concerned about having 6th graders ride with 12th graders. Of course, my case isn't that important, but I was in a junior, senior high, so I was a 7th grader walking into a school with seniors, 12th graders, and I was a pretty young kid compared to the older students. It was kind of odd, I would say. So I know that occasionally there's some, you would know better than me, but occasionally there's some issues, even grades 1 through 5, with students being bullied. I really don't know how often it happens, but it does happen, so it's just 1 through 5. I guess it's maybe up to staff or you to say, well, 6th graders and 12th graders won't be an issue. I'm pretty sure the 12th graders ride in the back of the bus, right? There's an automatic pecking order that occurs.
there is, students look forward to, moving up a grade so that,
So they can sort
move
of
further
roll
to the back.
back further, yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah, I think it could be an issue. I'd like to think that our 12th graders would help the younger students versus, pick on them just because they can. But occasionally, it'll happen. Of course, there's cameras on the bus, right? So we
There
always
are.
have a
Yes.
big brother watching if need be.
So would we not, if elementary schools, if we had another option, right, where 2 started here and 2 started there, would the middle and high school have to start at the same, or have to be picked up at the same time? Or could that be another option where we have their regular start times?
to get rid of equipment,
Equipment.
Right.
they'd have to start at the same times, otherwise you'd have 4 tiers.
Okay.
And
So we
the
have to
last
keep those
4
two
tier would
together.
start pretty
Okay.
late.
Okay.
So if you look at the slide that's up on your computer now, you can see in the morning, 41% of the high school students that are offered and have indicated that they would utilize the transportation that the district is offering. Only 41% of them do actually utilize it in the morning, and 35% in the afternoon. And that's based on a 2-week sampling after moving to the phase eliminating the AB days. Okay? So, you know, middle school, high school in the morning, that's like 103%, but, you know, that kind of ebbs and flows. That doesn't mean that the buses would be overloaded, and, you know, 98% combined in the afternoon based on the current utilization. And that was tracked with the winter sports and things like that too. So
But this was when we were still
this
AB
was
days.
post-AB day.
post-AB day.
Post-AB day. Yep. So, and that was just another reason why we did that. And if combining the high schoolers and the middle school students is something that the board or the committee does, you know, not choose to explore, when I've been with Right Way for 26 years, and the high schoolers and the middle schoolers were routed together when I first joined Right Way. So it is something that has happened. That doesn't mean that behavior dynamics and parent expectations that hasn't changed over the years. I'm sure we've realized that in the classrooms also. You know, it's a very different, it's a different environment, different decades. So, but
Sure.
they were transported together at one point in time.
So I'm assuming this would be the projection for fall, potentially. And so then we have the population that is currently virtual, and what is going to happen if we are no longer in that virtual environment come fall? What do these numbers look like at that point?
She started off by saying that she doesn't think it would affect
Okay.
the plan they put in place.
Yep.
By needing more buses.
But the fact that we would be at 103% capacity, if you're looking at these averages now, and then you look at the percentage of students that are virtual, you don't think that fudge factor is going to impact?
I wish I had a crystal ball, Mrs. Larson. I truly do. I truly do. It's projections is what it is.
But so of the list that they're using the 20% of the kids that are eligible, 20% taken out, kids that are eligible versus kids that are riding. It's 40% of those two numbers, not 40% of a bus. Does that make sense? So the buses aren't, you'll see later on in your, if you see, you can see our ridership, like some of them have 7 kids on a bus. So I don't think the 103 that she's stating is just of the eligible riders, not the bus capacity.
You are correct, Brittany, because there are some families who have signed up to say, yes, my child does need to have a seat on the bus to and from school, but they're not utilizing the transportation that you're offering. So that in a combination of, you know, children switching back to in-person from virtual, you know, I truly believe that we would be safe.
Tom?
Yeah, great discussion, and I appreciate the committee looking at ways to save money for next year. I guess one thing that maybe not for this committee to determine, but maybe for the administration to look at is, would there be an academic impact to the middle schoolers starting earlier? Or maybe some of the elementary kids that may start earlier, depending on how things work out. You know, I wouldn't necessarily want to impact their academics negatively if, you know, just maybe to save some money.
Are you referring to some of those studies that show that high school, the little ones, they're up and raring to go real early in the morning. Maybe they should have the earlier bell times, and the high schoolers who are typically up later in the evening, and middle schoolers not too far behind, they have the later start times, you know,
It's
so.
something to look at, something to consider.
Well, there's a lot of discussion here, but I don't know if there's a appetite for a motion on this. I'm not comfortable with picking this at this point, if
Nor
either
am
of
I.
you.
No.
I think we need to dive a little bit deeper into it. Mike?
Yeah, I think we should keep the later start time for MacArthur, you know, on, and also looking, you know, also keep the, as a possibility, and also keep the middle schoolers and high schoolers riding together, and see what other options we have.
Right, and with Tom's comments, Colleen, when would we have to make a decision on this? What's the latest?
April,
Okay, so we have a little bit of time. So we could have Brett and the administration look into the academic part that Tom brought up, looking at some of the other issues as far as middle schoolers riding with the high schoolers, and then getting together with Brittany and maybe looking at which two schools would be the better ones for the later starts. So I think, I don't know does anybody have a motion on this, or should we just keep it and table it until we go on another meeting? Bob, you're shaking your head yes on that? Yeah, I feel the same way. All right.
Yeah,
so-
I think table it, and Ray, I know I respect your concern about the 20-minute start time. I don't think the parents will care if, you know, County Line starts at a different time than MacArthur. You know, for starters, how would they even know? So the real issue is does it affect staff or the district office somehow? And I don't think it will bother.
And I should have clarified that a little bit more, Mike, and that's what I'm talking about, is that I was looking at, you know, just for one school, how is it going to affect the other three?
Right.
So that's why I'm saying, if we go to two schools, can we get those two schools both on the same pages? You
Sure.
know, with the traveling teachers and everything else, and then the other two work simultaneously that way too, in order to make this work. That's where I was going with
Okay.
it. Not just the parents, but the whole, the whole on it, so. All right, well, I think we'll just table this, and then we'll come back, Brittany, and we'll have a discussion and stuff, all right? So,
Okay.
all right. Item 6A, unfinished business, discussion with appropriate action, 2020-2021 ridership counts and COVID requirements.
Sure, the other document you have, we did combine some routes as of November, and we've had some families call with concerns, so I did just want to bring this back, showing the capacity of our buses, right way, as Colleen stated, said they did do a count of ridership for 2 weeks, and the detail is further in your packet if you want to get into the detail, but as she stated, the capacity of our buses is not at max capacity. We do have some routes that do have higher capacities in them. I'm not going to say that we don't, but the amount of students that are eligible and the amount of students that are riding, as you can see, elementary obviously is the highest, but it's at 72 and 73% of full capacity of a bus. That is 3 to a seat. We understand 3 to a seat is squishy, and we understand that that you have a lot of backpacks and snow pants and those type of things. But if you look at the actual, we have the actual bus, I guess, seating chart, that most of them are 2 to a seat. There are some seats that are 3 to a seat. They said they're doing them by grade level, and then I'm assuming that you would put the people that are 3 to a seat that are shortest on the bus, so they're not 3 to a seat for a longer period of time.
and if I may, Brittany, one of the things, the County Line parents, those routes, if they're 30 to 35, 30 minutes max, most of the kids are off. the bus is at its fullest capacity for maybe 8 to 10 minutes, and then children are off the bus, and it's not as, to use Brittany's term, squishy. Their buses just aren't as full.
Okay. Well, with the ridership counts, there's been a lot of parents calling, and there's been a lot of things that have been going on and incidents on the bus. And I guess my one question that would relate to all that with assigned seating, is it being followed by the bus driver? And also, we've had some, a medical incident that happened on the bus just recently and followed up. So are the bus drivers, other than just being told over a loudspeaker in the depot, are we sitting down and talking to these specific bus drivers and saying, hey, listen, this is your role and this is what we need to have you do? And if they aren't following through with that, obviously it's not following our guidelines either of what we're asking for.
Right.
So what's happening?
Patty and her team do individually counsel the drivers on the specific routes where the seating charts aren't being adhered to. I have had the opportunity to go to, not necessarily a school within the Germantown School District, but I have gone to schools to help do an audit of seating charts, and that bus does not leave the school grounds until the kids are in their seating chart. So then you do some spot checking, you look, and the driver is focused on the road, and these are not excuses or reasons, but children do have a tendency to change seats, and that's why we continue with our radio announcements, reminding drivers to, in addition to watching what's going on, you know, outside of the bus, and watching traffic and whatnot, that they do need to remind the students how important it is to stay in their assigned seats.
Okay. And we reviewed with the bus drivers what the proper protocol is for a medical situation on a bus?
Depending on what the situation
Well,
is,
we had a student pass out.
they radio and dispatch for assistance, and if we need to call for, you know, medical intervention or law enforcement assistance, we do.
And I know, Amanda, you had some questions that you had
I
concerns
do.
on.
I actually want to talk about the catch-all day. Were you guys able to discuss or find out how many numbers you actually picked up to bring to school?
There were very few.
Okay, so my question along with that is, can you explain to me a stop? Is a stop like, are they stopping at every single stop and waiting for students that you know of?
On a catch-all day?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, I have had some parents reach out to me saying that the bus flew by, so the only reason I'm asking that is because if they are just, you know, if a kid's not out there, I mean, think about in the last couple of weeks, we've had below freezing temperature. Nobody
Correct.
wants their kids, none of us want our kids sitting out there, right? So wait till the bus stops, but buses are flying by, not catching the kids because they're not out at that time. So if our kids for catch-all day aren't out exactly at that time and they're being missed, then we're not able to service them.
Yeah. The expectation is that drivers make a stop at all the stops and open the door, and they verify what their pickup time is. And if it's the pickup time or a minute after, they are given permission to proceed.
Okay.
So if that isn't occurring, then someone is not meeting the expectations.
So when we have parents come to us, would you prefer them to come to you directly to let you know of that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because we would send someone, you know, in the event that someone did miss the bus because a driver wasn't meeting expectations that we expect them to perform, how we expect them to perform, we would send a bus out to pick up that student and notify the school and let them know that, you know, Colleen's going to be arriving late and that it was our fault, not the student's fault. We would call that absence in or that tardy in for them.
Mrs. Arce?
Patty said if they call in a timely manner while a bus is still in the neighborhood, they could circle around also.
Okay.
Amanda, if you quickly want to, on the catch-all day.
Yep.
15 Germantown High School buses went out that transported 11 students. Of those 11, 10 of them were Kettle Moraine Lutheran students, so one of ours. And then in the morning on middle school, 23 buses ran, 23 students were on In the afternoon, 23 high school buses transported 3 students. And in the afternoon, 28 buses for the middle school transported 3 students. 12 of those were Kettle Moraine Lutheran. So correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm reading this wrong. Does this mean that Kettle Moraine Lutheran rides a KMS bus?
At the end of the school day, the Kettle kids ride home with the public
middle
middle
school.
school students, and in the morning, they are currently
already
routed
doing
to come in with the high school, public high school students.
So, and I believe Mr. Farren and Mr. Stouslin are discussing if we're going to continue transporting on the
Catch-all days?
yes.
Okay. Mrs. Larson, did you have something else about catch-all days? Yeah.
And a catch-all day is just truly for the virtual students to come in for additional learning? Is that what a catch?
Yes and no. Sometimes it's for kids who need to come in. They could be a non-virtual student and still come in.
Okay.
Yep.
Just
And before, like we just were doing this with the high school in the first semester.
Okay.
And we didn't provide transportation, but we would have over 100 kids that would come in. That would, in some virtual, some non-virtual, but it's if they have makeup work or need help.
Okay.
Makeup science experiment, whatever, they could come
Sure.
in.
But the way I understand it is we're sending a lot of buses out and not a lot of kids on it. And that's cost.
And this was the first catch-up?
This was our first catch-all day that we offered transportation. But per our contract, we'll pay the 65% if we don't run them. We'll pay 100% if we do. So if it did benefit and bring the students in to help them get the help they needed, the difference is the 35%.
All right, is there any more discussion on the ridership counts, COVID-19? All right, and then I have nothing else. Any other questions pertaining to anything? Mike, Amanda?
Nope.
Sarah, did you get your question answered? Okay. All right, otherwise, item number 7, I'll take
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Meeting adjourned at 6:37. Sorry, Mike.
It's okay.
Patty, Colleen, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like the screen where it is.